Ladies and gentlemen, this is WGS-TV. I'm your official Russell Gamer, Double B Billy Boudreaux. This is entry 43, and this entry is going to be a preview of the Saints versus Panthers match tomorrow. And just like we did last week with the Saints versus the Steelers, we're going to do it just the same way. We're going to go by the stats. We're going to go by the info that we have in front of us to base our predictions on. Now, again, last week, reading the stats, it kind of went almost to the time limit, about 13 or 14 minutes. So if it does it for this week, guys, this will also be a two-part entry, just like it was last week. So let's go ahead and get started. Right now, in the live Blowing TV chat room, I have Hitman, James, Ministry of Darkness, Rev Jake Slayer, WWE fan, and I know I have Ashley and everybody else on Skype. How you guys doing?
Doing pretty good.
I'm good. I'm good. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing just fine. Let's go ahead and get started with the stats for both teams. And, of course, we're going to start with the Saints stats. Again, these are all up-to-date stats, ladies and gentlemen. So for the New Orleans Saints, the total first downs, 172, as to the opponent's 129. First downs, first by rushing, the Saints have 44 to opponents' 48. By passing, they have 119 first downs to opponents' 70. And by penalty, the New Orleans Saints have 9 to the opponent's 11. Third down conversions, Saints still not looking very good in that category, as they are 49 out of 104 on third down conversions to the opponent's 38 out of 103. I think the opponents have a worse third down conversion percentage than the Saints do. So that's interesting right there. Fourth down conversions, they still up there with 5 out of 6 as to the opponent's 7 out of 11. Total offensive yards. The Saints so far have 2,921 total offensive yards as compared to the opponent's 2,298. For the offense, so far this year, for plays, they have run 531 plays, netting 5.5 yards as their average. As to the opponents of the New Orleans Saints, they have had 459 plays, netting 5 yards per play. That's not real good, guys. The defense of the Saints needs to kind of crack down on that if they want a chance of winning. Total rushing yards, the Saints have 678 to the opponent's 869. Now, if I would have said last year, at the end of the year, that next year the opponents of the Saints were going to outrush them this year, I think people would look at me like, are you nuts? Are you crazy? But again, we didn't anticipate Pierre Thomas getting hurt, and we didn't anticipate Reggie Bush getting hurt. But I do believe that Pierre Thomas is supposed to be back for this game. I am not too sure, but I think that's what the word is right now, that Pierre Thomas is supposed to be back for tomorrow's game. Now, as far as rushing plays, the Saints have ran 187 rushing plays, netting 3.6 yards as their average. That is not a very good average. Not a very good average at all, ladies and gentlemen. As compared to their opponents, 213, averaging 4.1 yards per play. That's kind of where the Saints need to be. That's where they need to be as far as their average goes per play. Total passing yards, the Saints have 2,243 as compared to the opponents having 1,429. Then again, think about who's the quarterback. Drew Brees. Passing, as far as the completion and the attempts, the Saints are 234 out of 331 as compared to the opponents of the Saints being 140 out of 231. They have been intercepted 11 times, which is, again, that's a very high number. But then again, think back to the Cleveland game where Drew Brees had 4 interceptions. But the opponents have had 5 against the Saints, have had 5 interceptions. And the average per passing play for the Saints, 7.1. Again, Drew Brees. But the opponents only netting a 6.5 average. So having that average over the opponents. That's a good thing to have right there. For the sacks, the Saints have 15 sacks while the opponents have 13. Field goals, the Saints are 13 out of 18 on field goals, while the opponents are 10 out of 13. Touchdowns, the New Orleans Saints have 18, while the opponents of the Saints have 17. Touchdowns by rushing, the Saints have 2, while the opponents of the Saints have 6. Again, something they need to work on. Passing, the Saints have 16. 16 touchdowns by passing. Very high number. While the opponents of the Saints only have 6. The Saints have no returns, no punt returns, no kick returns for touchdowns. Neither do the opponents of the Saints. And as far as defensive-wise, like turnovers or interceptions, run back for touchdowns, the Saints don't have any. And that's weird because I believe right around this time of the season, the Saints had at least 3 or 4. 3 or 4, if I remember correctly. While the opponents of the Saints have had 5 defensive touchdowns. Not a good number. Not a good number. Time of possession, the New Orleans Saints have the better in that one so far this season, as they have netted an average of 32 minutes and 53 seconds in time of possession, as to the opponents 28 minutes and 44 seconds. But their turnover ratio is still right where it is. It's at -5. You don't want to be in that minus category when it comes to the turnover ratio. That is not where you want to be. You want to be in the plus category. If you're in the minus category, that is not the place you want to be. Now let us turn our attention to the stats for the Carolina Panthers. And again, ladies and gentlemen, we're basing these predictions on these stats, on these numbers, the information that we have. The Carolina Panthers, when it comes to total first downs, they have 101, as to their opponents having 126. First downs by rushing, the Panthers have 22, as to their opponents have 48. By passing, the Carolina Panthers have 68 first downs, while their opponents have the same. So it's pretty much equal. They both have 68. And by penalty, the Panthers have 11 by first downs, and the opponents of the Panthers have 10. Third down conversions, I think their number is a little bit worse than the Saints, as when it comes to third down conversions, the Panthers are 36 out of 103. While the opponents are 37 out of 102. Interesting numbers right there. Fourth down conversions, the Panthers are 5 out of 11, while their opponents are 3 out of 3. And that tells me the Panthers defense have allowed all fourth down conversions this season. That's not a stat you want your opponents to have. Not a stat you want them to have. Total offensive yards, the Panthers have 1,760 compared to the opponents' 2,112. That's another stat. That's another thing you need to think about right there. Their opponents have more offensive yards than them. When it comes to plays for the offense, they have ran 429 plays, netting 4.1 yards per play as their average, while their opponents have ran 463 plays, netting an average of 4.6. Total rushing yards, the Panthers have 599, while their opponents have 833. And they have 180 rushing plays, netting an average of 3.3. 3.3. The Saints have a higher average than that, but not by much. Not by much. While the opponents of the Panthers have ran 229 rushing plays, netting 3.6 yards per play. Total passing yards, not a very big number, as the Panthers have netted 1,161 yards, while their opponents of the Panthers have netted 1,279. As far as passing goes, the Panthers are 119 out of 228, while their opponents are 131 out of 223, with 13 interceptions. Panthers have committed 13 interceptions. Wow. While their opponents have 10, and for each passing play, the Panthers have netted an average of 5.7 yards, while the opponents have netted 6. When it comes to sacks, Panthers have only 11 sacks, but while their opponents of the Panthers have 21. That tells me their teams, the opponents of the Panthers, their defense is getting to the offense on Carolina. Field goal-wise, Panthers are very efficient. In this category, they're 9 out of 10, while their opponents are 15 out of 16. So they're pretty much both equal in that aspect. Touchdowns, Panthers have 8 touchdowns, while their opponents have 15. Touchdowns by rushing, Panthers only have 2, while their opponents have 4. Passing-wise, the Panthers have 6, while their opponents have 10. And just like the Saints, they have no kickoff returns and no punt returns for touchdowns. And so do the opponents of the Panthers. But however, defensive-wise, the Panthers don't have any defensive touchdowns, but their opponents do. They have 1. And when the time of possession category, Panthers lose out on that one as well, netting only an average of 27 minutes, while their opponents, 32 minutes, 59 seconds. Turnover ratio, get this, ladies and gentlemen, the turnover ratio for the Panthers, -10. They've committed more turnovers than the Saints. That is amazing. That's telling me that there's a reason why the Panthers are 1-6 right now, just by those numbers. Just by those numbers. It's hard to believe. It's hard to believe. Now, again, ladies and gentlemen, I'm looking at the time. This will be a 2-part entry. This will be a 2-part entry, just to let everybody know. It will be a 2-parter. But while we have a little bit of time left, I want to get everybody's reactions that are on the Skype line to those numbers. Ashley, I want to start with you. Your reactions to those numbers.
Well, it seemed, considering the fact that the numbers aren't hugely favourable for Saints, you look at the numbers for Carolina and they seem to be much weaker, as reflected in the fact that I believe Saints are 5-3 and the record for Carolina is 1-6.
Yes. Who else was on the Skype line? WWE fan, I believe you're on the Skype line, aren't you?
Yeah.
What's your reaction to those stats that I just read when it comes to the Saints and the Panthers?
I'm going to have to pick the Saints to win it because the numbers show it.
All right. Who else is on the Skype? Rev Jake, what are your thoughts about those stats that I just read to y'all?
Honestly, I know about the same with football stats as I do know about Xbox. But just because they're your favorite team, I will put $7 on the Saints tomorrow.
Okay. Well, if I do have a little time to get my point across, maybe this will be like a 1-part entry. But well, again, it's the same thing with the Steelers against the Steelers. The Saints have to have that balanced attack because the Saints defense, considering those numbers that I just read, the opponent's defense against the Panthers, their offensive line is not very good. It's kind of shabby. It's kind of shabby in my opinion. Their defense can probably run roughshod all over the Panthers' offense on their offensive line and just get in the Carolina Panthers quarterback's face and cause them to make errant decisions. So with that being said, considering the fact that what kind of caliber team they are right now, this is no offense to the Panthers organization, to their franchise or anything, but the way they've been playing this year, I would have to put my money on the Saints. Because we know what kind of a quarterback Drew Brees is. We know Pierre Thomas is scheduled to return. It's not definite though, but their offense can probably run roughshod on their defense, and the defense of the Saints could probably just pin their ears back and just blitz Carolina, crazy. So, with that being said, that is my prediction. The Saints are going to be over on the Panthers. Again, it's just a prediction, not an actual truth. Well, that's going to conclude entry 43, the Saints versus Panthers preview. I'd like to thank everybody for joining me, and have a great night.